What's going on, everybody? My name is RICK CURCI, and this is a review for Resident Evil 3. An official review, not a game review that's going to be hidden within another video, which, by the way, I did put out the video for my fandom of Resident Evil, but then in there is my review for Resident Evil 3, but I'm just going to give it its own video right now. So I was extremely excited for this game, and mainly because of what I felt for Resident Evil 2's remake. That game I loved. I called it one of the best games of last year, and I still play it to this day. But I liked it so much that I just wanted to play more of it, and the Resident Evil 3 remake was basically saying that it was going to be the same game. So if I wanted more Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 was promising that. Not only that, but Resident Evil 3 was a big deal for me because it was the first Resident Evil game that I ever played as a kid. But then when Nemesis showed up, the big bad of the game, I got too scared and then stopped playing. I swore off from the Resident Evil franchise completely, and then I didn't pick it up again until I started playing Resident Evil 5, then with 6, and then 7, and then I went back and played some of the other ones. The point is, I was very excited for Resident Evil 3. So in Resident Evil 3, you play as Jill Valentine, who is a former cop. She was a cop in the first Resident Evil, and then because of the events of the first Resident Evil, there was an investigation, and then she got honorably discharged or something. Either way, she was a cop, now she isn't, and she's in the middle of Raccoon City right before the Raccoon City incident. And if you played Resident Evil 2, you know exactly what that incident is. A highly populated city has a zombie outbreak. So Jill not only has to navigate the zombie-infested streets of Raccoon City and all the chaos that ensues from there, but she also has to contend with this unstoppable force known as Nemesis. Just this big, hulking tyrant creature that is hell-bent on killing her and all members of the former cop unit that she was a part of called the STARS unit, which is Special Tactics and Rescue Service, right? Special Tactics and Rescue Service. I got it right. And then there's this whole big conspiracy. Who sent Nemesis? Why are they coming after it? We all know it's the Umbrella Corporation. If you played the last two Resident Evil games, then you should know that Umbrella's behind all of this. Umbrella is up to some shady stuff. So how does this game play? Well, it's the same exact thing as Resident Evil 2. So if you like the way that game played, you're gonna like how this game plays, with a couple of little changes here and there. For one thing, you're able to dodge as Jill, which is extremely vital, especially when you get into situations where you don't really have a whole lot of health. A lot of times in this game, instead of fighting zombies, you're going to want to run. Because at the end of the day, this is a survival horror game. In addition to having that horror atmosphere, you do have to survive. You have to manage your gear. You have to manage your ammo. And sometimes fighting that one zombie in the hallway just isn't worth it. So you try to get by them. But in Resident Evil 2, you didn't have a whole lot of options outside of like trying to get around them just by moving. But this game offers you the ability to dodge these enemies, which really helps, which was a good addition to the game. But another good addition was the fact that they included different types of enemies. Now, if you go back to any of my other reviews about games that had multiple types of enemies, this is something that I've always thought was really good because it warps your strategy. Different enemies require different tactics. I don't want to get into the specific enemy types because I feel like not knowing what you're encountering is actually more of a surprise. In my opinion, it'd be a spoiler to tell you that this enemy shows up in this game, because some of these enemies are from the original Resident Evil 3 and some of them are completely new additions. Either way, there are multiple types of enemies in this game and some of them require different strategies, though not all the time. I do recognize that a lot of these enemies just require you to shoot them until they're dead. But when you encounter a specific enemy versus just your standard procedure zombie, you do have to kind of think for a second of how do you take this enemy out. So in that respect, it does kind of mess around with the different strategies. But overall, the game pretty much plays the same. You have to manage your inventory. There's only a certain amount of inventory slots that you have. You have to weigh your options. You can't carry every weapon. I mean, you could, but then you're not leaving yourself a whole lot of room to pick up things that you might need, like health items or quest items. Sometimes you're going to need a specific key item in order for you to access a locked door so that you can continue along the game, which from that point, I guess we could go into my first major issue with the game, in that it's a little bit more linear than I was hoping it would be. Very often I'm going to compare Resident Evil 3 to past, or well, yeah, past. Not chronologically past, because I realized Resident Evil 7 comes after, but I mean, games that were made before this remake. But in Resident Evil 2, it would see you going back to the police station often. You would go to different areas and get new items, and then when you go back to the police station, you're like, oh, I can use this item at this point. I couldn't before because I didn't have it, and now I can, and there's new things to explore. And that's sort of the case in the beginning of Resident Evil 3 when you're in the streets of Raccoon City, but once you get past that, then the area behind you is locked off. So you never really go back to where you've been before. Very often, the game just kind of pushes you forward, and as you progress, new areas behind you get locked off. And I know that a lot of video games do that thing where once you get to the final area of the game, it does lock you off from any previous area. But Resident Evil 3 doesn't really warn you when that's about to happen. You just kind of go forward, and then you're like, oh crap, there was something behind me that I never had a chance to do, and now I can't do that. And once the game introduces Nemesis, you do want to run forward. Which brings me to my second major problem problem with this game in that I was extremely disappointed with the execution of Nemesis. Now, storyline-wise, Nemesis is an unstoppable force. It is a creature that is always stalking you and will just pop up randomly. And a lot of times you're going to be going through these situations and you're going to look at him and you're going to be like, how are you still alive? But that's storyline. That's scripted. There's only one time in this game where Nemesis isn't scripted, and that's it. One of my favorite things about Resident Evil 2 is Mr. X. Mr. X is an element in Resident Evil 2 that you can't really predict. You don't know where he's going to go. You don't know where he is all the time. And at the same time, he doesn't know where you are all the time. Oh my God, is he here? Oh my God! Why are you here? Of all places for you to be. There will be moments where he's in a hallway and he's looking around because he doesn't know that you're actually right over there. And you have to navigate the police station in Resident Evil 2 while Mr. X is active. And it's just so much more stressful. The most stressful moment of Resident Evil 2 is when Mr. X is around, because you can't kill him. You can stop him, you can stun him for a little bit, but you still have to contend with the other forces that are within the police station. You still have to worry about the zombies and the lickers and whatever else might be in your way. And I was hoping that Resident Evil 3 would have more Mr. X like moments using Nemesis, because Mr. X at the end of the day wasn't in Resident Evil 2 for very long. He was only really a force in that one section. And I realize storyline wise he pops up multiple times later, but again, it's more like scripted moments and it doesn't take long to get away from him. But in that one section in the police station where you have to move around and collect things and solve puzzles while he's active, it's the most stressful moments of the game because you don't know where he is at all times and he could just literally pop up at any point. And I looked back at some of my past reviews for some other horror games and I realized that this is a mechanic that I actually really enjoy about video games. Alien Isolation did it with the Xenomorph, Outlast did it with pretty much any enemy in the game. Even The Evil Within actually had a moment where this same mechanic was in play. There's a section of that game where the villain Ruvik will stalk you and you can't stop him. In fact, if you try to fight him, you're just going to make it worse for yourself because he'll just get closer.
During this level, Ruvik himself will randomly appear and stalk you. There is no killing this foe. When Ruvik arrives, you have one option: to hide. The game would have been monumentally more scary if Ruvik stalked you throughout the entire game at random points, forcing you to avoid him. Unfortunately, this ended up being a wasted opportunity.
It's just a shame that it wasn't in the game more. But ever since playing Resident Evil 2, I've always wanted more of the Mr. X. Just a game that I can play and try to navigate areas, but always having that Mr. X element. The reason why I bring any of this up as it relates to Resident Evil 3, Nemesis doesn't behave that way. When Nemesis is in play, he knows where you are at all times. Unless there's a scripted moment where you go into an area and you complete this thing and then he's gone until you get to a certain point and then he reappears. So it's not like you can go through the streets of Raccoon City, see him from a distance and be like, oh crap, I gotta go a different way. Because that's what the police station in Resident Evil 2 did. A lot of times you would be like, oh crap, Mr. X is over there, so I actually have to go this other way. Nemesis doesn't behave that way. So even if you did see him from a distance, he sees you from a distance. And then he sprints at you. Granted, he's far more terrifying than Mr. X was, but just in a different way. He's just coming right at you at all times. And when you get past that moment, then it's all cutscenes, boss battles, other scripted moments. So it removes a lot of that tension. A lot of the times you just have to survive him unless it's a boss battle in which you just defeat him. And trust me, after a certain point, that's all Nemesis is. And storyline wise, it's great. It's good because there's this force that just won't stop coming after you. But looking at it from a gameplay standpoint and someone who really enjoyed Mr. X and Resident Evil 2, you see a lot of the wasted potential. So overall, when it comes to Nemesis, what I hoped for I didn't get, and I recognize that might be a me problem, but again, wasted potential. It could have been better. And it's done by the same people. It's like, you guys did Mr. X right, just do that again, but with Nemesis. It's not like a different game developer did it one way and then these guys did it a different way and I'm expecting the same thing. No, but you guys just did it. You're the same developer. It's the same franchise. Not only that, but there are moments in this game where it does tend to get a little bit more actiony. The game takes the survival part and just kind of pulls it back a little bit, and it's almost like Capcom is backtracking. They made a lot of progress after Resident Evil 6 when they put out Resident Evil 7 and then they put out the Resident Evil 2 remake, and everybody's sitting here going, that's great. We are making progress. We are getting back to what makes Resident Evil great. And especially as somebody who went back and played Resident Evil 1, played Resident Evil 2, and played a little bit of Resident Evil 7 just for the sake of B-roll for my last video. But you see a lot of what makes Resident Evil so good in terms of the backtracking. A lot of these games do the thing where you have to find a specific key to open up a specific door. There's a lot of focusing on your ammo and focusing on what you have. And I think Resident Evil 3 kind of relaxes on that a little bit. It's just disappointing. And I'm not going to say that Resident Evil 3 is a bad game. It's just in terms of comparing it to Resident Evil games, you see where it kind of falters, especially when you have Resident Evil 2, where it does a lot of these Resident Evil elements and Mr. X elements so much better. And in this one, it goes more actiony. There's a specific sequence in this game, and I'm not going to get too specific because I don't want to get into spoilers, but you basically have to hold your ground and fight off seemingly endless waves of zombies. And it's like, this isn't survival horror. This isn't what I should be doing right now for a Resident Evil game. And it's even a sequence that wasn't in the original. In fact, to kind of piggyback off of that, I never played the original. So when I first played through the remake, it didn't really bother me. But then when I looked back and see what other people were saying about it, apparently there were whole sections of the game that were in the original Resident Evil 3 that did not make it into the remake. So in other words, this game could have been longer. We could have spent more time in it, because I did beat this game in one sitting. And this isn't like Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 2. There was one campaign. There was no like, okay, I played as Jill, let's play as Chris. Or I played as Leon, now let's play as Claire. It's just Jill. And even though you do switch between a different character in the storyline, which stays true to the original Resident Evil 3, it does kind of lean into this whole idea of it could have been longer. So you feel a little gypped. This game could have been longer. It could have presented more challenges. There wasn't a whole lot on the side of puzzles. Like Resident Evil 1 had me straight up sitting there scratching my head because I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. And sometimes Resident Evil 7 do that. A little bit less so in Resident Evil 2, but at least Resident Evil 2 had a lot of that backtracking and a lot of like, okay, I have this key, so now I can unlock these sets of doors. Resident Evil 3 doesn't have that. You kind of navigate a small portion of the game until you unlock the next portion of the game, then you navigate that for a little bit until you get to the next point. And it feels like as you progress, those times that you spend in these different sections become less and less. And as it progresses, you tend to get a little bit more actiony. So there's a lot of times in this game where you don't really worry about ammo. And I even noted that when I was doing my hardcore playthrough, like it felt like I wasn't losing out on any ammo. Whereas in Resident Evil 2, if you jump from standard difficulty setting to hardcore, all of a sudden areas where ammo would have been isn't there anymore. So it presents a little bit more of a challenge. But a lot of times in this game, I always kind of felt like I had ammo or I had health items. It wasn't all the time. Sometimes I did struggle, but I wish that those times to struggle were a little bit more, where I just had to be a little bit more cautious. Wish it was a little bit more scarce than it was. If we're looking at this game as a standalone video game, not connected to any other games, it's a good game. It's an enjoyable game about a person being stalked by this monster while also navigating the zombie apocalypse. It's good. It behaves well. The mechanics are great. The storyline is great. The characters are good. The animation is phenomenal. It's a good game when you look at it through a very particular hole. But looking at it big picture, knowing that it's connected to a larger franchise, you see the shortcomings. So is this a game that I would recommend? I would say that if you played the Resident Evil 2 remake and you liked it, then you're probably going to like this game. If you're a general Resident Evil fan, you're probably going to like this. But I say probably because there might be some moments where you're like, oh, this doesn't exactly do well with the Resident Evil formula. So I give you like a tentative, like, yeah, go ahead and play this. It's not as good as Resident Evil 2, but it's still an enjoyable experience. That's it. That's all I got. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm trying to get back to some of the videos that I used to do, some of the videos I enjoy doing. I love reviewing games. I like just talking about general stuff, so I want to kind of get back to that. And this is the first one. I know this game came out like kind of a while ago, but I wanted to talk about it here. I'm currently playing through Days Gone. I'm probably going to do a review for that one next. And then there's Doom Eternal. I want to play Outer Worlds. I want to play Sekiro. I looked over there because I got it right here. Sekiro. Gonna be a while before I actually beat that one and can review it. So there's a couple of other things I kind of want to get to next. Now, if you like this video, I would ask that you consider subscribing so you can get more videos just like this. Give it a like just so that it helps the algorithm and it can be recommended, and trust me, it helps. And as always, let me know in the comments if you played the game, what you thought of it. If you have any questions before you go to play it, more than happy to answer them. I want to encourage people to going into the comments. Let's have discussions about this kind of stuff. And also consider some of these other videos that are probably over here somewhere. I don't know if my finger's being lined up properly, but I'm going to do it anyway. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.